But he just goes, yeah. Okay, all right, well, you're healed. Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. And instantly, the man can see. And he praises God, and so do all the people, and all this kind of stuff. And here's the best part. The best part in the story with the blind man is he follows Jesus. So he follows Jesus on down the road, and this is a theme that you're going to see over and over again, is when Jesus heals and restores people, they just don't receive something from him, they join him. Let me say it again. When Jesus heals and restores, people don't just receive something from him, they what? They join him. A few years ago, there was a hiker who had gone missing. He was in Colorado, and he just decided he was going to go for a day hike, and so he got his stuff together, and off he went, and at some point, and somewhere in the journey, he got kind of turned around and a little misguided, and rescue teams were called in to find him, and, they searched the area, and they're calling his name, and, they could still track his phone, and, they're calling him and this kind of thing, and he never answered the phone, and so, but finally, after about 12 hours, give or take, he wandered back onto the trailhead, and he was exhausted and maybe a little dehydrated, and when the rescuers finally found him, they asked him the question. They just said, why didn't you answer the phone? I mean, we were calling your name and everything. He said, I didn't recognize the number. He's lost. He doesn't even know that there's a rescue going on, right? And in many ways, isn't this the story of humanity? Right? I mean, people are lost and they're wandering, and sometimes they're hiding, sometimes they're seeking, sometimes they're just curious, but most are unaware. Most are unaware that a rescue is in progress. And Jesus is the one who's come to lead the rescue party. And so we continue this series called Follow the Leader, and where we've been walking with Christ as we draw ever closer to Jerusalem. And so we've been journeying through the book of Luke. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to encounter two people. There's two stories involved today. These are two stories of people, one who's physically lost in blindness and the other who is lost in the grip of greed. But here's the good news. Both of them find their way home because Jesus shows up. And both of us show what it means when we seek the lost, when we share the gospel, and when we move from being people who are, shall we say, consumers to co-workers in the mission of Christ. And so we find ourselves this morning in this primary passage that I just read for you in Luke chapter 19. This is the story of Zacchaeus. But here's the thing about Zacchaeus. Even before we can talk about Zacchaeus, it would actually be really good if we were to back up. So if you have your Bible, I want to invite you to go back with me to Luke chapter 18. Just go back one chapter. Luke chapter 18, Jesus is on his way again. You know where he's going. He's headed to the cross. He's headed to Jerusalem. But last stop on the way is a town called Jericho. And so Jesus is approaching Jericho. He's got people with him, his disciples, and there's others who are in this massive Passover throng of people that would be traveling on the road. And there beside the road is sitting a blind man. He's a beggar. And he hears that Jesus is passing by. And so Jesus' reputation has preceded him because he asks, what's going on? And it's Jesus. And he starts yelling. He starts crying out, Jesus, Master. Other translations will say, Son of David, have mercy on me. And he can't see. He's blind. He can't see. So he doesn't know when Jesus stops. So just, engage this with your spiritual imagination. And you see this story unfold. And maybe Jesus just stands there while he's yelling and so forth. And he's just standing there watching the guy. And eventually, he says, well, call him on over. And so he does. And then in verse 41 in chapter 18, it says this. Jesus looks at him and he goes, what do you want me to do for you? This is a great question. Like, what would you do if Jesus looked at you and said, what do you want me to do for you? See, most Protestants that I know would probably say, no, what do you want me to do for you, Lord? And that's not the question. The question isn't, what can I do for you? The question is, what do you want me to do for you? And so that's the question. I think Jesus is asking this question. What do you want me to do for you? And that's a fair question. You ought to sit with that for a while. And so here's what the man says. He just replies out of a place of desire, straight out of a place of just pure, unadulterated desire. He says, Lord, I want to see. And Jesus goes, cool. Right? I mean, he doesn't snap his fingers. I mean, he doesn't do that. But he just goes, yeah. Okay, all right, well, you're healed. Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. And instantly, the man can see. And he praises God, and so do all the people, and all this kind of stuff. And here's the best part. The best part in the story with the blind man is he follows Jesus. So he follows Jesus on down the road. And this is a theme that you're going to see over and over again, is when Jesus heals and restores people, they just don't receive something from him, they join him. Let me say it again. When Jesus heals and restores, people don't just receive something from him, they what? They join him. This is it. And so this happens on the outskirts of Jericho. Jesus enters Jericho. There's obviously people who know that he's coming. There's folks that are there. They're lined up to see him. Zacchaeus, who is a wealthy guy, he's a tax collector, and he's widely despised. Okay? Now, listen. Don't go back to that old Sunday school song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just throw that away, okay? Just don't read it in Sunday school voice or sing it in Sunday school voice. You just got to see this. Here's this guy who's, a relatively powerful individual who is obviously small of stature, but very despised, who wants to see Jesus and can't, and so he's willing to go climb a tree. We don't know how old Zacchaeus is. He could have been 25, could have been 30, could have been 40. Man, if this guy, if he's like 50 and older, you're going to be like, hey, bro, you don't need to be climbing that tree. You're going to fall and break a hip, I mean, seriously. But there's this point, and I would say this, in this culture, for a grown man like this to climb a tree that's kind of undignified. But at this point, he didn't have anything to lose because nobody likes him anyway. I mean, he's kind of undignified anyhow. And so, but something, and I would submit to you, I think there's something that's stirring inside of Zacchaeus where he wants to see, he wants to know, he wants to catch a glimpse of who this guy is. And so, here comes Jesus, and he's coming down the road, and he climbs the sycamore fig tree. Here's a picture of the sycamore fig tree. This literally is in modern day Jericho. Is that the tree? I don't know. But it is one. And they've kind of roped it off, and they've kind of put a thing around it so that, people can see it. Go with me to Israel in a year or so, and you'll see it as well. Here's what I can tell you. Whether that's the tree or not, matters not. You're closer to the actual spot there than you are here, right? I mean, that's the thing. But again, grown men, they're not going to climb trees, but he does. And here's the cool thing. Zacchaeus is a seeker. Like, he's seeking after God. But the best part of that? Unbeknownst to him, the seeker is also the sought after. Like, God's looking for him. In fact, God comes strolling into town. And so just imagine, engage this with your brain for just a moment, and you just kind of see the story. Just put yourself in Zacchaeus' spot. Here you are, you're up a tree, right? However you got up there, I don't know. But you're up a tree, and Jesus comes strolling along, and he just stops and goes, and looks up at you, and you're looking down, and you're going, oh crap, right? Like, you've been found out. You have. And it's that moment. Watch this. It's in verse 5 and 6. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. What? Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. The crowd, however, watch this, but the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious, not just sinner, notorious sinner, they grumbled. Does he not know who he is eating with? I think the answer is yes, he does, and he doesn't care. Because he loves. Jesus loves him anyway. And so maybe somewhere they're in the course of the meal and they have dinner and they go through the thing, and Zacchaeus, by the end of dinner, we don't know what happens. Zacchaeus is a new man. And there he stands up and maybe he makes this declaration. He said, meanwhile, in verse 8, meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half of my wealth to the poor, Lord. If I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Hey, H&R Block don't give you that kind of guarantee. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, that's the CPA that I want right there, that guy, you know. But he says, I'm willing to make restitution. I'm going to do the right thing. This is a radical transformation. And again, another example of what we've seen over and over again in the Gospel of Luke, which is this idea of radical reversal. That the people who shouldn't get it, they do, and the people who should get it, don't. And this guy shouldn't get it, but he does. And watch how Jesus responds. Here it is. Salvation has come to this home today. This does not mean that he necessarily prayed to invite Jesus into his heart. Salvation is a complete and total restoration. It is an absolute rescue. Yes, I believe he crossed the line of faith in his life. Absolutely. But I think salvation, rescue, redemption, all that kind of stuff, it touches every facet of your life. It touches your emotional life and your mental life, and it touches your physical life, and it touches your financial life, and every area of your life is transformed. He says, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. And then he gives this statement, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost. So here's the point in these two stories. You've got people who were lost, you've got people who were found, but ultimately they were transformed. And so both the blind man and Zacchaeus, they encountered Jesus. But here's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. You ready? I want to talk about a part of these two stories that often doesn't get discussed, and that's the crowd. Because in both stories, the crowd plays a similar role. They're an obstacle to the gospel. They tell the blind man, the crowd does, they tell the blind man, be quiet. He goes, Jesus, Master, Son of David, have mercy. And they go, shut up. And then they grumble when Zacchaeus climbs down out of the tree and takes Jesus to his house. So here's my point, and here's why this is important. They're there for Jesus, but they hadn't bought into his mission. Like, they're there, but they're not sharing it. They want to consume the teaching, and they want to consume the miracles, and maybe they want to grab a free meal along the way, right? Like, maybe these are the people who are going there going, hey, maybe he's going to do that fish and bread thing. Like, man, I could do for another free fish sandwich, you know? I mean, so consequently, they're not invested in his rescue plan. But here's a hard truth. Ready? It's possible to be a part of the crowd and still miss the heart of God. It just is. And so I would say to you and I and to everyone here, catch this part. Jesus doesn't call consumers. He calls coworkers. And so if we want to follow Christ, if we really do want to follow the leader, then what we need to do is we need to begin the process of learning how to, seek the lost. And that doesn't necessarily mean just inviting people to church. Find a place to start, don't get me wrong. Find a place to start, encourage everybody to do that. However, that's not the end-all, be-all. The end-all, be-all really is to live into the idea of being the church, of sharing our lives with other people. There's a pastor who lives in the Nashville area. His name is Robbie Gallaty. He pastors a church, Long Hollow Baptist Church. And he wrote a book called Replicate. Wonderful, wonderful book. And in his book, he makes this distinction between consumers and coworkers super clear. Here's what he says. He says, consumers ask, what's in it for me? A coworker says, what's in it for you? Consumers focus on what Jesus can do for them. Coworkers take responsibility for other people. Consumers criticize things that don't line up with their preferences. Coworkers are just excited and appreciate what God is doing in the church. Consumers come to sit and get. Coworkers look to go and serve. And so here's the question that I read this book, and I was sitting there and I was reading, and I was kind of cut to the quick because I had to go back and I had to ask myself a hard question. Ready? Here it is. Have I ever really made a disciple? And I don't mean, have I ever preached about discipleship? Yeah, I mean, I've done that. I've done that a lot. I mean, have I ever made a genuine disciple? And here's how you know, right? Like, have you poured your life into someone else and you've mentored them along in the faith so that one day they turn around and they do the exact same thing with somebody else? Want to know if you've made disciples? Well, then you'll know you've made disciples when your disciples have made disciples. Okay? And that's like a generational thing. Okay? And here's the good news. The good news is if you're going to be this person who's going to say, you know what, I think my life needs to count for something, and I think I need to start beginning to learn how to make disciples. Here's what you don't have to do. Ready? I'm just going to free you up. Ready? You don't have to go grab a bullhorn and stand on the corner and scream at people. Okay? You're welcome. Okay? You don't have to put on a sandwich board and walk up and down the mall, telling people, ringing a bell, telling people that the end is near. Now, if God tells you to do that, you ought to obey God and go do it. Okay? However, I will say, sometimes the method may turn people off more than the message. Not long ago, Gay and I, we were gone out to eat, and we come out of this restaurant, and I heard this person, and he was yelling and going on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what it was, and I thought it was like somebody was arguing with somebody, and they were screaming in the parking lot, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go get in my car. I don't want to get shot, one of those things. And then I scanned and looked around, and then I noticed, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. There's some dude up there. He had a bullhorn. And he was up on the high part of the road, and he was wailing. He was giving it to him. I was like, okay, I'll bite. So I got in my car and drove over there and, stopped and put the windows down. I just wanted to listen, And I was like, you know what? And here's my conclusion. I agree with about 90% of everything that guy was saying. I just disagreed with the method and the way in which he was going about it, right? But here's the thing. You don't have to do that. In fact, the best thing that you could do, honestly, if you're really wanting to learn how to make disciples, and if you're intent on following the leader and becoming a coworker and not just merely a consumer, I'm going to give you 3 ideas that I think are practical for your life. Ready? Number 1 is this: build relationships before preaching. Now, there's somebody in the room who's going, "Hey, I don't preach. I'm out already." Woo! Yeah, that's one down, No. Everybody preaches, okay? You do. Your life preaches. It does. Long before you ever open your mouth, your actions are speaking way louder than anything else. But so here's the point. Jesus just didn't declare Zacchaeus saved from the tree. I mean, he could have, right? He could have just walked up to the tree, looked up at him, and went, "Ho, today salvation has come to this house." He could have done that, but he didn't. Why didn't he? Because he ate with him first. He ate with him. If we want to share the gospel effectively, you got to earn the right to be heard. You just do. So do this. Simple ideas. Ready? Go grab coffee with a coworker. Invite your neighbor over for dinner. Be a friend first before you try to become their teacher. Do you know what I mean? I had a very wise mentor tell me early on in my journey of pastoral ministry. Here's what he said to me. He said, "Jeff," he said, you can't be their prophet until you've first been their priest." Here's what he was saying. He was saying, until you walk the road with people and you journey through some hard places and you pray with people and you hold hands with people and you marry people and you bury people and you baptize people and you walk alongside people, until you've been their pastor, until you've mediated the grace of God to people, until you do that, you can't really speak into people. They don't want you to. But if you're willing to win the right to be heard, at some point you'll be able to speak hard truth, and then you can speak in a prophetic way. Do you see that? It's the same principle. It's the same idea. So build relationships before preaching, right? Second idea is simply this: see people, not sinners. I mean, hey, listen, let's make no mistake. Zacchaeus is a cheat, okay? He is. He's a cheater. He's lining his pockets, he's doing the thing, but the blind man, here's what we can say. The blind man was a beggar. So you've got both people, and you know what? They're both at opposite ends of the social spectrum in terms of unacceptance. Like, we're not going to accept either of them. Society has written off both of these individuals. But Jesus comes along, and here's what Jesus sees. Jesus sees people to be loved and not problems to be solved. Isn't that good? Aren't you glad that you're just not another problem to be solved? You're not. You're a person to be loved. And so he comes and he calls Zacchaeus by name. So here's my question to you. Who in your life have you dismissed? Man, that guy's never going to get saved. Man, she's not going to turn her life around, right? Who is it? Is it the coworker with a hard heart, right? Is it your neighbor who never makes eye contact and they're just weird, right? Or maybe it's a family member and they've just kind of drifted far from the faith. Or it's your friend that, man, you guys had a great relationship until they found out that you voted this way and they voted that way. And suddenly politics became the dividing line in between the two of you, right? What would happen if you shifted the way in which you see that person? And what if that individual became a person to be loved and not a problem to be solved, right? And then in the midst of that, we're winning the right to be heard, and then the door will eventually open for us to do this. Number 3, live the gospel, don't just speak it. See, Zacchaeus' transformation, it's not just mere words. It's not. It's action. Because here's what he did. He heard the gospel. He encountered Jesus. He is Jesus. I mean, it's Jesus, right? And suddenly, he says, I'm going to pay back everything that I've stolen. I'm going to care for the poor, and his repentance became visible. It wasn't just words. And so if we want other people to follow Christ and take our faith seriously, then we got to take our faith seriously. And they have to see us taking our faith seriously. And so we need to back up our faith with some serious action. And so our own lives have to reflect that we follow the leader. So here's what that looks like. You ready? Love your enemies. Be quick to forgive. Give when you don't want to. Pray unceasingly. Serve without any expectation of getting anything back in return. Zephaniah chapter 3, at the very beginning of our worship, it's what Walker was leading us through. Zephaniah chapter 3 reminds us of why Jesus came. Here's what he says. The prophet says, "Sing, daughter of Zion, shout aloud, Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart." Here's the why. Here's the why. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He's turned back your enemy. Aren't you glad that God has taken away your punishment? Oh my gosh. I mean, like it's been dealt with, you guys. It's been dealt with, and he's turned back your enemy. You know what this is? This is the song of the saved. It is. And Zacchaeus, think about Zacchaeus for just a half sec. Zacchaeus goes from being an outcast to suddenly he is now host of the Savior of the world. The blind man goes from begging to sitting in the dust, begging, to dancing in the streets. And this is what happens when Jesus finds lost people. It's what happens when people, the church, partner with him and go from being lost to found to transformed. All because we stopped going to church and we became the church. Here's the point. Jesus doesn't call consumers. He calls coworkers. So whether it's a man who gets lost while he's hiking, whether it's a blind man who's lost in his physical affliction, or it's this cheating tax collector who knows something is not quite right and I'm missing something in my life. There's somebody in yours. There's somebody in your life who's unaware that God has launched a rescue party and is searching for them. Or maybe they're just sitting on the roadside waiting for something to happen. Or maybe they're just curious and they just want to catch a glimpse of Jesus. And it won't happen until you befriend them, until you open your mouth and you win the right to be heard, to have a conversation about the Savior. So again, I ask the question, who have we dismissed? Who have we just written off and just said, nah, not going to happen? Who needs an invitation? Only you know. I don't. Only you know in your life. Who's the person who needs to be seen, known, loved, named, and even called down out of their tree? Because again, the gospel spreads when we stop going to church and we go and be the church. So we come here, we meet with God, we renew ourselves in the mission of God, and then we go forth to live the message. And then what we do is we realize that He chose us. God chose us. God chose you. Not to be just a consumer, but to be a contributor and to carry the invitation. So I'm here to say today is the day that you and I need to step out of the crowd. Don't be an obstacle to the gospel, but step into mission. Now's the day. Today is the day to follow the leader. And to someone else in the room, listen carefully. Today is the day of salvation. Like you've never accepted Christ in your entire life, but you've gone to church for a long time. Hey, well, listen, just because you put a wheelbarrow in a garage doesn't make it a car. I mean, you can put a person in a church, that doesn't make them a Christian. That'll make them religious if you're not careful. The last thing in the world that we need is more religious people. But we need more people who are in love with Jesus. We definitely need that. So if that's you, and you're going, if I don't know what my spiritual life would be like, like I don't know what eternity looks like on the other side of today if tomorrow was the day. Well, to you, my friend, I can say it's as simple as a prayer. It's as simple as a prayer from your heart to surrender your life to the goodness and the grace of God. And you know what I think? I'm not asking you to invite Jesus into your heart. I'm not. I'm asking you to invite Jesus into your life. Hey, listen, if your life is the house of God, then I'm inviting Him to come in and rearrange the furniture. And that's what I think you need to do. And so my hope in this moment is that you do exactly that.